Welcome to the JetLife podcast, pulling back the curtain on private aviation so you can live that jet life to the fullest. Whether you're looking to charter a jet or own a jet, my name's Tom Lelyo, and I'm your ultimate jet guide. Now on to the show. All right, hello and welcome everybody to the JetLife podcast. That was our first intro drop live, Tim. You got to experience that.
That was wonderful. Super professional. Love it.
We're getting there. We're getting there. It's a process. So welcome everybody to the JetLife podcast. I'm your host, Tom Lelyo, where we pull back the curtain on private aviation to help you experience that jet life to the fullest. Today, I'm joined with Tim Wade, who is in charge of the Safety Wire podcast, which is where I first saw him. And we're going to be talking all about safety today in private aviation. So Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure, man. Thank you for having me on.
So we are really lucky to have you today because you have just been swamped. There's so much going on in your professional life. Do you want to pull back the curtain a little bit and tell us what's going on with where you work and all the craziness that you've been up to lately?
Oh my goodness. So thankful to take a day remotely today. It's been one of those weeks where you just need one of those catch-up days and you're actually able to do it from home. So I'm very thankful to be here with homebrewed coffee. It's great to finally to take a remote day. So not only am I the host of the Safety Wire podcast, that's what I do personally on my off hours. I love doing that because I thought it was a market that we could reach in aviation that not many people were really looking into. There's a lot of great podcasts out there, yours included, and I love how you touch on safety quite often. But I really wanted to hit safety from as many perspectives as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Outside of the podcast, what I do 9 to 5 and pretty much 24/7 is I'm the director of health and safety for Constant Aviation, which, as you've seen in the news recently, is merging into our sister company, FlexJet. So Constant is a Part 145 MRO. We do large overhauls, large maintenance in both Cleveland and Sanford, and we have a nationwide AOG team. FlexJet, on the other hand, is a 135 charter operator, a very large charter operation, which they have global outreach. They also have a maintenance component as well. So the idea behind that was getting two very well-established companies that complement each other and combining them into one company that will greatly serve our customer base much more than we were able to in the past, and we can definitely focus on the mission at hand. So these, like I said, these are two well-established companies in both their fields. So the merger is going to bring together and has been bringing together two very established and proactive teams. So we're seeing where, with most acquisitions, you'll see where it's, the parent company, you're coming on board with the parent company, you're going to do what they do. In this case, we're seeing that there are great benefits in both organizations, and we're looking at what is best move to go forward with programs, procedures, daily operations, all those sorts of things. So from what I've seen, it's been a very open, inviting environment for all of our teams coming together. We're able to look at what we each do well and bring that to the table.
That's awesome. Well, two huge players in the industry. When you look at maintenance and safety, Constant's, way up there. There's a lot of different, I was just talking to someone today, a lot of different places you can take your jet to, different tiers. You got your service centers from your manufacturers. You got your reputable, are you guys an authorized service center in any, or are you kind of just like right below that tier?
I think we're still authorized Embraer Service Center. I know we have different qualifications in different areas. We have different foreign certificates as well. I work with our quality team, but they would be way more knowledgeable than I am on that one.
Sure.
But I do know we've got many qualifications for different foreign carriers, and internally I believe we are still an Embraer Service Center, and I think we have a couple more as well. Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, Constant's one of the top tier places that you want to go for maintenance, as opposed to going to Billy Bob's garage, when you're looking at a place. So, and with FlexJet, obviously, it's a huge thing. But we're not here to talk about them. We're here to talk about safety. You are the Safety Wire podcast guy. So let's jump right into it.
Let's do it.
Tell me, what are your thoughts on this word safety? What is safety in aviation, like broadly? And then we're going to start to pile it down a little bit with some of the questions we're going to ask.
I have a great mentor, and I kind of side with him on this one. We hate the word safety. I think it has been ruined over the years. I think too many people now have a negative connotation when you think of the word safety. When you think of, even outside of aviation, when you think of manufacturing and you walk into, an auto manufacturing place, if you say you're the safety guy, you think people are like, oh, great, I'm so happy to see you. It's Unfortunately, it's the same way in aviation, and we have tried, at least I have over the years, and I know a lot of the people I work with have tried over the years to change the mindset of safety. We want to be viewed as proactive. We want to be viewed as a team of service. We are here to assist you to have the most comfortable work experience possible, to send you home in the same way possible, to let you understand that it's our responsibility to teach and to be a resource for all of our team members. I think too many people also look at the safety team as they keep us safe, and we don't. Not that we don't want you to be safe. It's not the safety team's responsibility to keep you safe. It's our responsibility to provide you with as many resources, understanding, knowledge, and training so you can make the best risk assessment on the floor with your position. I want them to feel empowered to look at their daily operation and know that if they perform their duties properly, that they are inherently going to be safe. Safety and quality should be a byproduct of a well-rounded organization. So Constant and FlexJet both have the exact same mentality of we want to write our policies, procedures, and the outlook of the organization in a way that is going to serve everybody it touches the proper way. And if our guys on the floor and our people operating our aircraft are following our procedures and adhering to the training we have out there, safety is an incredible byproduct of that. All right, it shouldn't be two separate things. It should be if I'm operating the correct way and utilizing my policies the correct way, safety is going to be a great byproduct of that.
For sure. So you work a lot with the mechanics and kind of like the back end people, if you will. We're gonna shift today and talk about safety from the end user's perspective and how obviously what you're doing with them is going to inform the end user or the buyer's safety. So a lot of people travel private aviation for safety reasons. There's a various topics, within that. Let's talk about some of those, topics, whether it's hygiene, whether it's mechanical, logistics, personnel. What can you tell us from a perspective of someone getting into private aviation? What should they be considering when it comes to safety? What are some of the topics that maybe we want to unpack a little bit?
Yeah, if you were switching from commercial to private travel for the first time, there's some great perks to private travel, but they're only meaningful if you know what to look for and what those perks are. So I think when it comes to safety, especially in private travel, knowledge is key. If you don't know, make sure you're working with someone reputable who does, because as all people who are operating in private travel, we know this is a major investment. And, with all wise investments, you should want to learn as much as you can and take advisement prior to making the investment. And there's some great ways to do this. First up, if you're intent on being an owner, start with a broker, start with fractional ownership, start where you have a team supporting yourself. And if you're looking to just travel privately, get with a reputable charter operation. So, like I said, with my experience with FlexJet, they guide our customers through every process they wish to be involved in so that they're educated on the decisions they need to make. Like I said, that knowledge piece is great. We could touch on regulations all day long, training, mechanical, logistics. There are so many different facets that are involved in the operation. And how we look at safety, it touches everything. And that's why we want to get away from that word of safety, is because people automatically think it's a hard hat, it's cut gloves, it's things like that. It's not. Safety touches finance. You have to properly maintain finances to operate the business. It touches HR. You have to hire the right people into your organization. Those are all things that are tied to safety. So we could touch on all of those options, but I really think the most important thing here is knowledge of the operation. And if you don't feel 100% comfortable with your knowledge set, get with the people who have it. All right, get yourself a brokerage team, get yourself the charter team, get with a company, like I said, with FlexJet, who has a massive owner services team that is going to guide you through that process. All right, so it's really about learning the process.
Yeah, and I think what's really important is while you're learning is understanding that you're going to make mistakes, is understanding that mistakes are going to be made, is understanding that it's going to be a little bit of a messy business, because I see a lot of people will get analysis paralysis. They focus so much on learning and educating themselves that they never end up pulling the trigger, and they miss out on all the benefits of private aviation. So,
Exactly.
by working with a team, we can only do so much as brokers, as mechanics, as pilots, as whoever, we can only do so much with what's unexpected. You know,
Hmm.
if when this plane was, first being delivered in the 1980s or the 90s, and someone forgot to log something, or they scratched something out, or something's missing, or it wasn't recorded correctly, like, we can only do so much, with that kind of
Exactly.
stuff. Or if there's a mechanic and he's not being careful, and he's trying to jack up the nose of the plane, and he puts it in the wrong spot, and all of a sudden there's a hole in the nose. Which unfortunately has happened to me. Like, that's out of our control. So in the education process, I definitely want to advocate for people to understand, like, it's a messy process, going to take time, but if you have the right team, you can navigate through all those obstacles.
Exactly. Exactly. And a lot of that comes down to understanding risk, the risk in this industry, and understanding your own personal risk tolerance. If your risk
Hmm.
tolerance is super low, you have no risk tolerance at all, this might not be the best option for you to become an owner. You might want to rely on charter operations and things where other people are making the big heavy decisions there. If you have a higher risk tolerance and you really want to get into this, once again, have the knowledge set in stone, but an owner side might be great for you at that point.
No, I love that. That's an absolutely fantastic point about risk tolerance and knowing yourself. I think a lot of people kind of miss out on that. So that's a great point. So a lot of the first time buyers, they want to balance price point with
Mm-hmm.
this idea of safety slash risk, if you want to call it that. So if I'm
Yes.
buying a jet for the first time, what are some safety items for you that would be a no-go, a deal breaker? Whether it's missing logbooks, or engines past TBO, or damage history, are any of these, deal breakers? And I don't know, your experience, Tim. I've primarily dealt with legacy citations, so I've seen a
Mm-hmm.
wide range from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I don't know if you're primarily dealing with newer stuff where it may be more of a big deal.
Yeah, we have a lot of newer jets with FlexJet. They handle a lot with the Gulfstream line legacies as well. For me, on the safety side though, because I can kind of put myself in anyone's shoes going through this process. I'm one of those people with a very low risk tolerance. I'm a safety professional. I don't like taking risks. I do understand in our business there is going to be a set of risk. You can't just be zero risk. All right, yeah,
Right.
that's just a poster on somebody's wall. It doesn't actually happen that way. There's no industry that has zero risk. And once you kind of understand that, you can progress forward proactively. So, like I said, there's nothing I really feel comfortable pushing. However, someone writing the check is going to feel differently. So, every situation is different. Make sure you're relying, as we said before, on the reputable people and the minds that you're using to advise you. Those are the people that have the knowledge on the regulations. Those are the people that have the knowledge on
Hmm.
records. Those are the people that have the knowledge on maintenance. Rely on them because especially if you're new to this game, you don't know what you don't know, really. There are
Yeah.
so many auditing companies. Which one is, which one's reputable and which one are you just buying the certification from? Because there are some that you're buying the name, and there are some great reputable auditing companies out there as well. There's some operators, same thing, who knows how well their safety program is. And if you're new to this and you don't have that knowledge base, that's when you really need to rely on that team, that set in stone, time tested team, your owner services department, your broker who has been there. This isn't their first rodeo.
Yep.
That's when you need to rely on them for that.
Would you be comfortable if I toss out a couple of these things and we kind of go back and forth on examples like missing logbooks, engines? If you don't mind playing devil's advocate a little bit, if I was to just kind of present to you, like, hey, like, look, we're missing the logbooks, but the logbook, it's a 1980s jet, and the missing logbooks from the 80s, let's say from the 90s to the 2000s, but then they pick up back again. Maybe we can recreate them. What would your concerns be, as someone, possibly looking to purchase something like that?
I would be concerned with how well it's going to get recreated. And when you're the owner coming into a recreated logbook or records that are getting pulled from who knows where, once again, you don't know if it's getting pulled from a reputable source. Is the team that's rebuilding this logbook pencil whipping things, or are they actually getting some great,
Yeah.
decent paperwork done? Are they doing the research they're supposed to be doing? Are they getting with the regulatory agencies? Once again, this comes down to working with reputable people who are there to educate you and who have a background on creating a lot of these items that are needed to rebuild some of these logbooks, because that does happen. The older aircraft from years and years ago, they're going to have records issues. but are you going to work with someone who's going to make this a reputable logbook? And then also, is that going to get checked off and bought off on by possibly another team that's going to make sure, yep, this is correct, they did it the right way, we're going to put our stamp of approval on that, all right? Don't, I want to say cheap out on it. That's not a great way to put it, but don't take shortcuts when it comes to your records. It will bite you in the long run. Don't take shortcuts when it comes to your life limited components. It will bite you in the long run. All right, make sure, once again, with how large of an investment this is, this should have your 100% undivided attention that you are operating it properly.
Yeah. Can you speak to this idea of pencil whipping? It's something that gets tossed out in the agency around, and I kind of explain to buyers, obviously, the different levels of maintenance, the different pedigrees of maintenance records. But this idea of pencil whipping, what's that fine line? Because once someone puts their name and their number on it, their license number on it, I mean, there's should be some sort of not like a stamp of approval, but like you can hold them accountable. But what maybe you could speak to this idea, like what is pencil whipping? What have you seen, and what are some of the maybe the signs that people can look out for when they're reading some logbooks?
Yeah, it really comes down to, like I said, the reputation of the company that you're using. Constant Aviation for the longest time has had the tagline "Quality Always." We are heavily invested into our quality team, and I love working alongside them. Safety and quality go hand in hand together because we want a professional, proper product being put out onto the market. And maintenance is a product that we're putting out there. So we always double check our logbooks. I know we have certain inspections on every single piece of paper that comes across the desk, every stamp that is getting used. Wow. We are using chief inspectors, floor QA, back-end QA, people building the logbooks, people building the work packages. There are a lot of moving pieces, and where you really want to look is what are the checks and balances for those moving pieces. And this is where it gets into SMS. SMS is looking at risk, and then you see a risk. What are we doing about that risk? We're going to put controls in place to reduce that risk down as far as you can get it. And then you're going to control it again and control it again until it gets to a point where you're able to work with. Quality is no different. We want to have as many checks and balances in place with all of our quality systems, so that way the paperwork is reliable. And as you mentioned before, Bob's Garage, I don't know if they would have, there are great mom and pop MROs out there for sure. I don't know if you would want a small, very small operator who is not familiar with paperwork and logbooks rebuilding a logbook and maintaining the paperwork. That's where you would want to look for someone who has extensive personnel who are able to use it and who have done it multiple times in the past to really work on that paperwork for you.
No, I love it. That's a great point. This checks and balances system, that when you're working with someone, whether it's, a mechanic turning a wrench, or it's rebuilding logbooks, or it's whatever it might be, even like cleaning, and hygiene,
Yeah.
When we talk about risk, line guys, the FBO that you're going to choose, what are the risks that are there, and what are the systems? Is that what SMS is? The systems for mitigating the risk, to provide a safe environment where your aircraft, your asset is, and your passengers yourself, are being taken care of. So when you're looking at, the boutique shops where it might be one or two people, might be a fantastic mechanic, but what happens when the fantastic mechanic is having an off day? Who's checking that work? Who's making sure that it's all being done, appropriately? It's just, again, to your point, it's education, and it's something that an owner needs to consider and keep in mind.
Too often people want to ignore that human factors is a real thing. And I think that's another phrase we want to get away from, because human factors has been around for years. The Dirty Dozen from the FAA has been around for years. Everybody has an off day. Everybody gets tired. Everybody has experienced loss in some form or fashion. Maybe the mechanic got presented with divorce papers that morning. Maybe everyone has a life outside the hangar and outside the cockpit. And a proper checks and balances system keeps that mitigated to the lowest level possible. That's how SMS works. Doing human factors training, recognizing human factors. You don't just want to do the training for the employee himself and say, hey, if you're going through a tough time, speak up. You need that training on the supervisory side as well, so they can recognize it. They can make sure, hey, I got a guy, he's just not acting right. He's usually very talkative. He's super quiet today. Get him off the floor, discuss it with him, Do your checks and balances there. Who knows? Maybe nothing's going on. Maybe he just didn't want to talk that day. But educating people on the warning signs for human factors is extremely important on both the maintenance and the flight side.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, let's shift into, a lot of people are coming to me, hey Tom, like I want to put, my plane on a charter certificate. From the owner's perspective, what are some things that they should look for in the operator, or what are some things that they want to ask or just be mindful of when they're handing their jet over to another company, a management company or a charter company? They're handing this asset over. What are some advice that you would give to that person?
So for this one, I'm going to sidestep the regulatory piece because I would hope that would be top of anybody's list, no matter what you're doing. Am I handing it to someone who is properly abiding by regulations? And this goes back to, as we've discussed this whole time, knowledge, knowing the regulations, knowing what looks wrong. Excuse me. So I would say,
are you speaking of like the 134.5 operators? Is that what you're talking about?
no, I would never do that. No, I mean, it's.
But making sure they have the right certificates to be running a charter operation.
Are you doing? NATA's website all have for years has had a big block on there. Avoid illegal charter, and this is a big issue in our industry. So going with a reputable charter company who has stood the test of time, not that they've just had a certificate for the past 45 minutes and you're hoping for the best just because it's the least stress and biggest turnover for your income. It should not be solely income driven. This should be doing your research and properly doing your research. So I would say, number one, their involvement in the operation. When you hand your jet over for charter operations, how involved is that company in the operation? In the care and feeding of the crew that's going to be operating it, in the maintenance of the aircraft? I'm sure there's multiple different plans for actually putting your aircraft into charter, but how well is it going to be maintained? You can almost compare it to an Airbnb rental. Those Airbnb operators who are solely invested in it. They have professional cleaning companies. They have great communication back and forth, and they're really taking the care and feeding of their customer as they're bringing it on board. Same thing with your aircraft. Make sure you almost feel cared for as you're discussing it with the company. Next up would be their knowledge and understanding of the aircraft, a broad knowledge of the regulations to know right from wrong. Do they understand this aircraft? Are you handing it over to them and this is the first time they've ever seen one and they're, oh my gosh, it has engines on it? No, they should they should have a thorough understanding of it. And then proper support. Knowledge of the aircraft also comes with proper support. Are you able to not only charter my aircraft, are you able to support it in flight? If it lands in, some grass strip airfield out in the middle of nowhere for some reason, are they able to actually maintain it properly and get it back up in the air? And I would say the last one, and I can't say this enough, and we've already mentioned it a few times, but the value of your investment. This is not just an asset, but it's, the value of proper maintenance from reputable companies, the value of technology to streamline it. You really need to understand the value of what is actually being held in this aircraft. It's not just your upfront charge. It is a continual legacy. And if, like you said, you're working with 1980s and 1990s aircraft, there's a reason there's most cars are not that old on the road, but a lot of aircraft are. They are maintained properly as a very great asset to have in your portfolio.
Ooh, I'm going to use that line. No, I think that's fantastic because a lot of people don't consider all that goes into it. I mean, real estate's pretty much, everyone understands it because y'all live in a house.
Yes.
You're probably a homeowner. You probably have your bills. You kind of know what goes into owning a house. Plus, obviously it's a stationary asset and it's been around for a while. But when it comes to private aviation, like most people getting into it, at least a lot of the calls I'm getting, they don't own a plane already. They're investors, they're backseat kind of guys right now. And you don't know what you don't know. And to your point, like how important the maintenance over the years, you've got these things called logbooks, you've got pilots, you've got mechanics, you've got line guys, you've got paint shops, you've got brokers, operators, maintenance management companies. I mean, there's just such a wide breadth of information to be aware of. And I appreciate you pointing all that out to us because it really shows how important it is to have a trusted, team when you're looking to make this purchase.
Exactly. If you truly wanted to compare it to your home, imagine that everything in your home that beeps, moves, has a light on it, has its own dedicated team that needs to support that, or at least somebody with knowledge of how that works, or at least a phone number in your back pocket that you can call when it's not working. That's what an aircraft takes. I mean, just because you're an aircraft mechanic does not mean you can overhaul an engine. That's another team. Just because you are an AMT doesn't mean you can overhaul landing gear. That's a completely separate team. You need to understand that every moving component on that aircraft is probably relied upon by a completely separate team. There are so many people involved in the operation of just one flight. And I think you really need to understand that prior to getting into it. Or, once again, start small. You know, you don't need to jump in the owner's seat just to be involved in private travel. Start with the charters, start with fractional ownership, and work your way up to your own.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, you're such great things. I think a lot of people also, to your point with every component needing different teams, a lot of people don't understand that, like, yeah, Cessna made a citation, but, the engines, that's a different company. That's
Yep.
Pratt& Whitney. The avionics, like, that's a different company. Like, so when something goes wrong, like, it's not like you call up Textron, and just be like, hey, my plane's broken. Like, no, you have, like you said, different teams and even different companies that are involved within the creation of that one asset that you're looking at. That's great.
Exactly.
Cool, man. Well, let's kind of start to head into the final question that we had here. From an owner's perspective, what are the top 3 things owners neglect? And I guess I'll kind of pivot a little bit and say, the top 3 things that an owner would neglect that as a buyer I should look out for. And then if it's any different, or maybe we just frame it this way, like if you do own a plane, don't neglect these as well. I don't know if there's 2 different things, but I would definitely like to talk to, what are the 3 safety items that owners will neglect from a buyer's perspective, what we should be looking out for?
I would say proper record keeping, proper maintenance, and keeping up with the new technologies coming out. One of the best things about an aircraft is if you can maintain, say, the avionics systems and the newer technologies in your aircraft, that'll drastically set it apart from the other aircraft born in the same era. Keeping up with proper maintenance kind of goes without explanation. And when I say proper maintenance, I don't just mean following that one inspection, but using it from a reputable company that is going to maintain the regulations, maintain the logbooks, maintain the record keeping, which was also the last piece. The records of an aircraft are the life of that aircraft. Okay, you can say it is whatever it is, but if you don't have the paperwork to back that up, the certifications, the regulations, the proper documentation, it's almost worthless. I've heard in the past of aircraft just not being able to be sold because the documentation and the records don't match up at all, and it's too high of a risk for most people who are knowledgeable in this industry to touch it. And those aircraft end up sitting on the ramp for years and years and years because their documentation wasn't maintained in the right way. And that being said, like I said, maintenance. Maintaining the aircraft in the proper way is just as important as maintaining your documentation in the proper way. Doesn't matter if if you didn't maintain your engines the right way, but you have the paperwork saying you did, or vice versa. You need those 2 go hand in hand all the time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, and with the records, like if you're an owner, please digitize your records. Okay, please scan them in. Okay, or send them to a company, get them scanned in. Digitize the records. It makes a huge difference, and especially the valuation, because it's perception, right? Like, well, this guy didn't scan his records, or he didn't put them into digital. Like, how on top of it is this guy? Because we're in 2023, and why don't I have digital records? So I think that's important. Check out maintenance tracking programs, whether it's JSSI, formerly Sierra Track, SESCOM, Traxall, whatever you want to use. When you even yes, Excel spreadsheet is a step in the right direction, but it still has a perception. When I hand a buyer an Excel spreadsheet, from Bob's Garage, versus, or I love it when it's, we have proprietary software. It's like, okay, but is there a backbone, or are you like a constant, or someone who's been there for a while that, okay, you deserve your proprietary software? They think that's important with the records. Do you have anything to say about like records or digitizing them, or?
Well, I would definitely say a sleek little thumb drive looks a lot better than a coffee-stained binder that's fallen apart. So, digitizing your records and also making a backup copy of the digital records, because if you lose that one thumb drive, that's a very expensive thumb drive to lose. So, making sure your records are attainable, accessible, and easy to use and navigate.
And that's why it's important, to your point, like to have a support team on the maintenance side, because again, Bob's Garage, he might be great at turning wrenches, but is he good at, you know, relaying the information of
Hmm.
what he did into a way that, like you said, it's systematized, it's easy to follow? Because I hate
Exactly.
turning into logbooks and like I can't, I can't find anything. It's not marked. Like, where's the hot sections? Where's the
Hmm.
overhauls? And with a lot of these tracking programs, it's garbage in, garbage out. An
Exactly.
Excel spreadsheet, and some of the programs, like, they don't require a third party to go through it. That's why some maintenance tracking programs will cost more, because they will actually have a third party kind of verify, hey, is this really what was done? And you can have more confidence in those records in one platform versus another, or an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, when it comes to your record keeping, the investment is worth the money. It's worth an extra few dollars
Yeah.
to make sure the records are maintained properly. And like you said with the maintenance company, do they have a project manager working through this project, or is it just hoping on the reliance and the knowledge of one person? Do you have a QA team actually double checking these records and maintaining them properly? The bigger the aircraft, the bigger the investment, and the bigger the team that
Sure.
should be in place to support it.
Yeah, for sure. What about with maintenance? What are one thing I always kind of, maybe you can speak to this, but I always
Hmm.
kind of mention to people is, this idea of an AD and an SB. I mean, obviously the airworthiness directives are something that we want to make sure that's all complied with and comply with appropriately. And then we look at service bulletins, the SBs, that are kind of just, hey, by the way, there's some things that are going on, whether it's, hey, the seal around the fuel cap, just watch out for it, because we've been noticing that they've been corroding, and it's
Hmm.
causing a problem. So, can you speak to anything from the safety perspective in terms of airworthiness directives and safety bulletins?
I'll always do what's required of you. And hands down, the first thing up, if it's required, make sure you're maintaining it. And if it's not required, understand that it was researched to the point that they put it on paper for a reason. So if
Mm,
it's getting to the point of a service bulletin, even if it's not required for you to do so, there's a reason it came down like that, and make sure you're paying
wow.
proper attention to it. At least get it vetted by somebody. If it's some, like with our cars, if it's some weird recall or something like that that doesn't really make sense, and it already says in black and white it's not affecting the value or the operation, I understand that. But once again, a lot of the service bulletins we've seen come down in the past do end up becoming something important, way important in the future. So make sure you give it your due diligence. Make sure it's vetted by somebody reputable, so you actually understand what's going on with it. We've talked this whole podcast on knowledge. Make sure you understand what is being said to you and what you're reading. Because believe me, if somebody took the time, especially at the FAA or the OEM, to write it down on paper and put it out to every owner and say, hey, you should do this, I think that's worthy enough to pay special attention to it.
Yeah, and a lot of I think owners don't understand that it's, the maintenance manual for your jet was handed down, off the mountaintop, received from above, and they have the maintenance manual, but that maintenance manual is outdated almost from the time that it gets printed.
Hmm.
Once people start flying it around, they start finding stuff out, and that's where the airworthiness directives comes from. They're an update to the manual. The service bulletins, they're update to the manual. So your maintenance is not, just this one book. And so I think it's important for owners to recognize that, because you can ask your mechanic, hey, did any ADs or SBs come out since my last annual, or since
Hmm.
my last, C check, whatever it is, and they'll tell you. So, or if they look at you quizzically, you could be like, okay, really, dude? Like, are you
Hmm.
staying on top of,
Yeah.
you want a mechanic that's staying on top of the ADs and the SBs. So that's just the component that, I think some people just think there's a maintenance manual and that's just it for the end of time, but really it gets updated on a regular basis.
Very often, and that's a good point you bring up. Are you the sole owner maintaining your subscription to your maintenance manual? Being an owner, is the maintenance organization you're going through maintaining their subscriptions as well? I mean, if you're seeing something that says copyright 1997, you might want to check in with them and say, hey, is this the current materials we're supposed to be working off of? Because I know with us, we have subscriptions to obviously Gulfstream and Embraer and Bombardier and all the OEMs we work with through Constant. And I know our quality manager is always continuously updating our subscriptions and things like that, because they get updated all the time. And you need to understand,
Hmm.
it's not your Ford Taurus out in the driveway that once it's built it's good to go. Things change all the time, and I think we're even seeing that in the automotive side. Is you almost don't get a manual in the car anymore. It's an app you put on your phone, and I think that's where aviation's going as well. Is the manuals are continuously updated. You always want to be linked to them in electronic form, so you always have the current copy of them.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about like electronics. Let's talk about that technology real
Hmm.
quick, and just kind of speaking into that. I mean, owners don't necessarily understand. Like, you get technology, but you also have subscriptions that come to it. Your charts and your databases, so that's going to be an ongoing expense. Um, but with your avionics too, like when you're upgrading, thinking forward compatible, thinking ahead of what you might not, you might only think that you need like a little bit of an upgrade, but by putting that investment into better technology, it could be a game changer. I mean, even just Wi-Fi,
Hmm.
like that is something that maybe 5 years ago it's like, oh, it'd be nice if my plane had Wi-Fi. Now, it's almost becoming a necessity that in the air you need Wi-Fi, and not just this, text and email Wi-Fi like what used to be, on pagers and stuff, but streaming and all that kind of stuff. I mean, looking ahead, I think the technology in the cabin is important, like with the Wi-Fi stuff, and obviously in the cockpit with your GPS, your navigation, your comms, etc. So you have better situational awareness is important as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I think anybody who loves electronics in their own home, they kind of have their name brand loyalties. They don't just want the cheapest knockoff possible. They stick with
Yep.
their name brands. There's a reason for that, especially when it comes to aircraft avionics and aircraft technology. Those names have built themselves to where they are today because for a lot of them, you can almost upgrade the software over time, and it's a pretty big window of when you're going to need to actually upgrade the component, which is going to be your more expensive overhaul. They have built their components and systems to be able to be upgraded by the avionics technicians at a lower cost, and then as the time does come, hey, we're going to swap boxes, we're going to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and again, to your point, you said the avionics technicians. I mean, that's a whole other team. I mean, all of these are a different team. Your records team, your guys that are actually turning the wrenches and the maintenance, and your avionics, your technical team.
Hmm.
They're all different teams. And there's a lot to it, and like, yeah, you can kind of get bogged down if you're looking at a smaller jet. You don't need all of these team members, but it's again important to know so that if you want that, go find a shop or a team that's going to do all that.
Hmm.
So
And pretty much anything you can look at on that aircraft can have a dedicated team. One of the teams I love the most, I love walking through our interior shops. They do brilliant work on cabinetry and leather and upholstery, and actually seeing an aircraft getting pushed out for RTS, having an aircraft detailing company come in and do the proper cleaning of that aircraft and buff it out. And honestly, and cleaning an aircraft is one thing that nobody wants to do, but these guys are so dedicated to their profession and their craft. I follow one on social media. It's wonderful to see him going, "Hey, this was a red wine spill, and I got it all out, and it looks beautiful
oh,
now."
sweet.
And to see the pride in their work down to something of cleaning the jet. It's not just the maintenance of the jet and building the jet and perfecting all the nice odds and ends of it, but taking pride in the cleanliness of the jet and the mirror finish on the chrome. I work with guys all the time protecting the jets. There's guys that make wonderful, unique custom covers for each component of the jet so it doesn't get damaged during maintenance, and they have pride in their work. And I think one thing that, if you are a new operator, one thing I would tell you coming into this industry, you will see is that almost every hand that touches your aircraft or your documentation, that person has true pride in what this industry really holds and the product that we're putting out. We all love putting out a quality product, and it's wonderful to see it.
I do agree with that. Aviation has been a wonderful breath of fresh air from other industries that I've been in. That people who have been in here for a while, like they are genuinely passionate about aviation
Hmm.
and want what's best. I want to see the continuation and the flourishing of the future of aviation for sure.
Exactly. I truly agree.
Well, Tim, tell us where we can find out more about yourself, the Safety Wire podcast, what you're doing over there, and how people can connect with you. Because this has been a fantastic interview. And I really do appreciate you being here.
All right. Hey, I appreciate it too. Thank you for bringing me on. So the Safety Full Wire podcast is still fairly new and it's gaining a lot of momentum on LinkedIn. It's also on YouTube and Spotify. That's where I'm putting out most of that stuff. If you need any information on maintenance, charter operations, Part 135, anything involving aircraft, please reach out to me and I'll gladly get you into the right hands with the organizations that I'm working with. If you need any information on aircraft safety and things like that, I'm also working with the safety committee with MBAA as well. So please reach out. I'm on LinkedIn. If you guys need anything at all that I can assist you with regards to aircraft safety, I would love to be at least a vessel getting you in the right direction.
That's awesome. All right. Well, we're going to see if this outro is going to work. But
Let's do it.
again, thank you so much and appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to check out theultimatejetguide.com.